Well, hey, happy Thursday again. Welcome to So What, the Marketing Analytics and Insights live show. I'm Katie, joined by Chris and John. This week, we're talking about Google Postmaster tools. And so, this is a continuation of a conversation we had on the live stream last week about email marketing metrics. And we started to dig into the more technical side around Google Postmaster tools. So, today, we're going to be talking about what it is, why it matters, why you should care, why these are things you should know about. We'll be talking about how to use the 7 main features of Google Postmaster tools and what actions to take to improve your score. So, if you do a lot of email marketing, this show is for you. So, Chris, Google Postmaster tools, what is it and why does it matter? And why don't more people know about it?
I don't know why more people don't know about it. That's a mystery. If you're familiar with what's now called Search Console, it used to be called Webmaster Tools, and it was a tool for SEO professionals to be able to sort of see what Google sees when it comes to your website. Well, in the email marketing world, Google also created Postmaster Tools, which is, again, for email marketers to sort of see what Google sees and provide some context for it. Now, if you look at your email database, and there are absolutely no Gmail addresses of any kind, and you know for sure that none of your prospects are using G Suite, Google's hosted environment, then this may not be as relevant to you. But if you've got clients who use G Suite, Trust Insights, for example, we use G Suite for our corporate email. It's powered by Google Mail. Or if you've got Gmail addresses in your database, then you probably want to know if your emails are getting to those folks and if what your reputation is. Because if you're kind of on Google's naughty list, you're probably on some other naughty lists too in terms of email behavior.
What do you mean by, the quote unquote naughty list? By like sending spam emails or not conforming to Google's rules or all of the above?
All of the above, and that's actually what the 7 major features of Postmaster tools do, is they give you Google's point of view about your email marketing infrastructure and your behavior, and then say whether you're doing good things or you're doing bad things. If you're doing bad things, obviously try to do less of them and do the things that are expected of you. So let's actually go ahead and show what this thing looks like. It's much less appealing looking than Search Console. Search Console's gotten a lot of love over the years. Postmaster Tool is very much sort of vintage 2012 here.
How about before you dive into that too, is this your first stop for deliverability questions? I mean, if somebody's concerned about what they've got going on with email, is this the easiest and first place to start?
No. I would check something like MX Toolbox first to see, what your reputation is broadly. Now, for Trust Insights, and especially for me, for my own personal newsletter, Gmail and Google addresses comprise close to 70% of the database, right? So it's a big deal for us to make sure that we're working well with Gmail. If that's not the case for you, then I would say something more generic. So let's go. Actually, you can see MX Toolbox here. And this is a free set of tools. And in MX Toolbox, one of the things you can do is to sort of say, like, tell me what's going on. Like, what's the health of my email? Am I on any blacklists? Things like that. That would be, I would say, my first stop, just to see, like, am I doing something wrong? So let's go put in trustinsights.ai here. And actually, let's do it under email health here. I get a whole bunch of ads. And it'll give you like errors, warnings, and things that you passed on. So in this case, I don't see anything major wrong here. There's no red indicator. So I'd say we're probably in reasonably good condition. Then we go to Postmaster Tools. So there's 7 major components to this application. The first one is spam rate. And the 7 major items are listed helpfully under this little menu. This one's really simple. Anytime you send an email to somebody and in Gmail, they hit the report as spam button, this tells you how often that's happening for all the emails you send. The goal is, well, there's 3 thresholds. You want it under 1%. right? That's sort of the gold standard. If you can stay under 1%, you're doing good. Because there's always going to be that one person who's just like too lazy to find the unsubscribe link and just going to hit mark as spam.
Well, it's right next to the archive button too. Totally ridiculous.
Yeah, no.
Well, to be fair, I hit the report as spam when I'm getting emails from people I didn't subscribe to in the first place, which means that they probably bought my email from a list or scraped it from a website. So that to me, I mark those as spam. So I'm that person who loves the report as spam button. It's like it's second to my first favorite thing, which is saying no.
It is saying no. It's just saying no differently.
It's correct.
So under 1% is the safe zone, like they call it the green zone. Between 1 and 5% is the yellow zone. Like if your reported spam rates are between 1 and 5%, there are going to be some. It means your list is probably not as clean as it should be, and you may want to do some cleaning of it. And then above 5% is the red zone. That's where you're going to end up on blacklists. Google may stop delivering your mail entirely. And so you definitely don't want to see that. So we're looking at the last 4 months here for Trusted Insights. We send out a weekly newsletter. And so you can see, for the most part, we are at or close to zero. The highest we ever got was 0.4%. So we're in good shape. So this is stop number 1 in Postmaster tools.
I think it really goes back to what is your email marketing strategy? Where are you getting those lists of people? Are there people who you have, given them the opportunity to opt in? Or are they lists of people that you've bought from somewhere else? So they've never heard of your company and can't figure out why they're on your list. So as a side note, I actually did try to unsubscribe from an email that I didn't sign up for over the weekend. And I clicked unsubscribe, and then it brought me to a screen and it said, "Are you sure?" And it had a yes button and a no button. Guess which button didn't work? The yes button didn't work. So I kept clicking no, and it would be like, "Thank you for subscribing to our email." And it's just this continued. So then I finally did report them as spam, and I emailed them back and said, "You need to fix this because you're going to keep getting reported as spam because I never signed up for you."
Yep. Yeah. So this one's easy to control, right? Obviously, make sure that you don't put people on your lists that they didn't ask to be there. And again, those numbers, the 0 to 1 is good, 1 to 5 is not so good, above 5 is in danger territory. So that's number 1. Second thing is IP reputation. So every server that sends email has an IP address of some kind. And what we're looking at here for Trust Insights is, we are operating on our email marketing software runs on a virtual machine hosted by a company called Linode. When other tenants are sending out mail, coming from the same IP address, we kind of it's like good neighborhood, bad neighborhood kind of thing. You're driving through the the neighborhood, it's like, oh, suddenly I think I'm going to lock my car doors. Kind of the same idea with servers. The IP address of the server. Are there people on there who are sending out all kinds of email that shouldn't be? If it's just your server, like you bought a dedicated IP address, it's just your server, this is a reflection of just your behavior. But for companies like us, where we rent space on in a much larger installation, you can see here that in August, the place we're renting from, I guess, gentrified or something.
I see, a gentrification email.
And now we can see here that the IP reputation where we're sending from has gotten better. This is one of the factors that goes into where Google places your email. So in Gmail, for a lot of folks who have it turned on, there's 4 different places your email can be. It can be in the primary inbox, which is where you want to be. It can be in like the promotions tab, which is not as good because it's all ads. It can get sort of third priorities falling into the updates tab, or the second to worst place is the spam bucket, the spam folder, where nobody ever sees it. The most worst places, of course, it just never gets there in the first place. So your IP reputation is one of those factors that goes into it. Now, we don't have as much control over this, other than if you're going to be doing a lot of email marketing, you buy a dedicated IP address for wherever it is that you're sending your emails from.
But it sounds like, especially smaller businesses, you're going to go the route of renting versus buying because it's just probably more cost effective and easier to manage, quite frankly, especially if you're if that's not your jam, you're not into managing IP servers and whatnot, which most of us aren't, except for you, Chris. So you don't have control over who your neighbors are. Can you find out who they are, or does that depend on the service?
You can sometimes find that, and actually, I believe there's a tool in MX Toolbox for some of those diagnostic to see like what else is on this IP address. But yep, so you can put it in your mail server and look. It can look to see like what's going on that server in general. But one of the things that is tough to do is we have a marketing automation server, but that is not where the email comes from. Our email goes through Amazon's email service. So it's actually coming from Amazon servers. So this is actually a reflection of whatever shard we're on at Amazon, not even the server that our stuff is on. So from that perspective, you really don't know. All you know is that whatever instance we're on at Amazon is working better.
How about this is one of those things where I've had situations where you get ranked very poorly. And if you just call support and say, hey, throw me on a different IP address, I've had them move me before. But is that something that you want to do, or does that create other long-term problems?
You can do that. Like if you're in the sort of the blood red, everything's on fire, then yeah, it can't hurt. Like it's not going to get worse.
Okay.
So that's IP reputation. The next is domain reputation. Domain reputation is essentially an assessment of everything that you're sending your email out from. So in this case, Trust Insights, our reputation has been high for, as long as you can see a data on this chart. This is where you can have some real interesting conversations with your IT team, with your sales team, with your PR team, because every email that goes out from your domain gets looked at this way. So a long time ago, Katie, I think this might have even been before you joined the team at the old company. A new person had joined one of the PR teams from a different agency, and I was in charge of the marketing automation, doing all this stuff with Postmaster tools. And suddenly I started getting notification after notification, like, "Hey, you've been blacklisted. You've been blacklisted. Your reputation's tanked." I'm like, what's going on? I went to find out one of this new person on the PR team pulled the entire media database from Gorkana, all 70,000 reporters, and mass blasted their client's pitch to every one of them. The entire planet, from like the Card Magazine of Malaysia to the New York Times. And of course, nobody wanted that, and it impacted the entire company's domain name. So this is one that is under your control. But you got to know who's doing what at your company, because other people, like, if there's a new sales guy, it's like, yeah, I'm just going to blast the database. Oh, don't do that.
So the consequence of that is the person, sent out a mass email and then everybody reported it as spam.
Yep, reported as spam, said, we don't want this, complained, whatever
Okay.
and it harms everybody.
That was indeed before my time, but I feel like I've heard that story before.
Yep. And so this is measuring the behavior of your domain, your organization. So there's a couple things that are best practices, especially if you're a larger organization. One of the best practices is that your email marketing goes out on a separate domain than your corporate email. So, for example, we would have trustinsights.ai. We might have trustinsightsmarketing.com. And we would have all of our email marketing go through that. That way, important things like accounts payable notifications and stuff go out and they get received. You're not endangering all of your operations. We're not big enough to justify that yet. But certainly if you've got mission critical emails that have to get out, you may want to split off that domain.
One of the old companies that I worked at had huge deliverability issues because of the name of the company. And so it's something to factor in. So the name of the company was completely, innocent, but unfortunately they spelled it with 2 X's in a row. And so the domain coming through with 2 X's was then flagged as inappropriate content, spam content, adult content. And that was one of the challenges that the company forever had with getting email through to places like the FDA and pharmaceutical companies because it kept getting caught in that filter. And so the domain reputation and the deliverability was actually really poor. But because it wasn't a IT heavy technical knowledge company at the time, they didn't know what the problem was other than the emails kept getting flagged as inappropriate content.
Yep. Oh well.
Well, so be careful of the name of the company that you choose.
Right.
Yep.
We won't have Trust Insights pillscasino.com up and running anytime soon.
Probably not.
The fourth is the feedback loop. So a feedback loop, some internet service providers and things, some pieces of software actually will allow services like Google to talk directly to them, so that if somebody hits unsubscribe in an email, it's automatically processed and you don't have to do anything whatsoever. You'll even see this in Gmail. If you're in Gmail, sometimes there'll be the mark as spam button will move and there'll be a new one called unsubscribe. And for those companies that have that more advanced feature, this is the feedback loop where Google will say, hey, here's how often the feedback loop is being engaged. It's another measure of people essentially saying, I don't want this. But because the company has gone through the effort of turning on this protocol and integrating it, it's less likely that someone will report you as spam. They'll hit the unsubscribe button instead that Gmail provides and get taken off the list that way. We don't have this set up.
No, I know we don't, but I guess and it seems logical. It sounds like you would rather have people unsubscribe than mark you as spam.
Exactly.
Like that's the goal, is if you're reaching a bunch of people who don't want to hear from you, you want to make sure that it's easy for them to unsubscribe versus what I do, which is, okay, this unsubscribe is frustrating. Now you're spam.
Exactly. So like if you were to look, for example, in the Trust Insights newsletter, you would be able to see, let's go ahead and switch over to this version here. We put it pretty clearly. Hey, here's the email I just subscribed here. Here's the big old link to do it. And of course, because people do look at the bottom, we have another one at the bottom. So we try to make our best effort. In my own personal email newsletter, we go for absolutely hilarious, and we put this in and say, like, if you can't find the unsubscribe button, you need medical attention because something's not right with your ability to see. But the short version is making things as easy as possible to unsubscribe cuts down on this sort of thing.
It's a topic for another day, but there's certainly some sort of an insecurity and psychology that goes into why companies make it so difficult for people to unsubscribe. I personally, you can unsubscribe from us all day long because it means that we're not wasting our time trying to convince you that we are the right company for you. I would rather have people who want to be here versus people that we're just like, please stay, please stay, please stay. Like, if you don't want to be here, then great. Let's make it super easy for you to unsubscribe so that way you can just go along your merry way and we can find more people who are actually interested in the stuff that we are talking about.
Exactly right. Okay, so that's feedback loop. The fifth is authentication. So authentication is using these different deliverability protocols, DKIM, DMARC, and SPF, and whether they're set up correctly. And we actually had an issue. I was looking as I was getting ready for this show today. We had an issue in one of our SPF records, so I actually had to go in and fix that earlier. It's not reflected here yet, but it will be reflected in future shows. These are three protocols that essentially say, when we send email, we are who we say we are. When you get an email from Trust Insights, it really is from us, and it's not being sent on behalf by some other third party or some nefarious middle person. It really is us, and so you need to have these three protocols set up. Now, this is done in your domain name service records, your domain name records. So wherever it is your DNS is hosted, you and your IT team would need to implement these protocols. The easiest way to check to see if they're set up correctly, there's a number of different services. You can see the MX Toolbox has some. I really like the one from Demarcian, so I'm going to put Trust Insights in here. And all this does is it goes through, it looks at our records and says, hey, it looks like congratulations, you set up everything correctly, right? So when I did this earlier, there was actually some things that were not correct that I needed to go in and fix. So now it's showing that these things all look good. But Mimecast, for example, the folks over at Mimecast have a really good tool as well. And they all do pretty much the same thing. They say, did you set up your records in a way that machines can correctly read them, so no problems detected, and they're not too long, and they've got the relevant things. Now you can see sometimes what happens when you do it wrong. Let's see if my domain is not so perfect. I think I had some issues earlier. Nope, that's fine. Let's try marketing over coffee.
I was going to say, you can probably try mine because I'm sure that that's not set up at all.
Yeah. Well, so in this case, yeah, it's saying there's no these records. So one of the takeaways for John and I would be, okay, we probably need to go and set that up so that when the Marketing Over Coffee newsletter goes out, people actually get it. So that's what this authentication tab in Postmaster Tools does. Is it tells you, did you set these things up correctly? Yes or no?
I love how these live streams always make John's to-do list even longer.
Like
every single week, John, okay, here's the 5 things you need to go do now.
I'm like, oh yeah, oh that's broken. Hey, yay. Yeah, I have to get a shirt or a scoreboard or something.
This is totally under your control, but you'll have to work with IT if you're not a marketing technologist. If you are a marketing technologist, then you probably already know what to do here. I very strongly recommend that folks use some sort of proxying DNS service. Companies like Cloudflare, for example, are really, really good, and they have a free plan so that it's easier to maintain these things. Because I've had it happen in the past where someone I managed made a change to a client's DNS record, and it broke the DNS record, the A record, which is the root record, and so the client's website and the whole IT infrastructure just came to a grinding halt. And because they had set the time to live to 72 hours, the customer's entire infrastructure was down for 3 days. I was like, don't do that.
Yeah, when 100 million years ago, when I worked at a different company, the engineers would give us codes to update DNS and root records in order to be able to see things on staging and different environments. And it always like made my gut clench because I was like, you're asking the wrong people to monkey around with these records, because they would give them over to senior managers who could barely get the printer to work, and that wasn't their fault. It's just they weren't the technical people. And so, yeah, I think that the big takeaway is like, don't monkey around with your DNS records. Find someone who knows what they're doing.
Exactly. To give you an idea of what that looks like, so this is the Cloudflare interface. So you can see there's our DMARC record, there's our BIMI record. This is the SPF record. So you would have to go in here and create this record. And there are tools, there are wizards that can help you sort of assemble this. But you still need to understand how DNS works so that you get it correct. Because again, if you do it incorrectly, you delete the wrong thing, you're going to have a really, really long day. Okay. So after authentication, the next is encryption. So encryption in this case refers to when your mail servers are communicating with Google servers. Is that transmission encrypted? Is it protected from attack? This is one of the cases where, unless you own all of your IT infrastructure, there's a good chance that there's a vendor in place here that's doing this. And for us, because again, we're using Amazon as our gateway. So Amazon service connect to Google service there. Everything's 100% encrypted. And so you can see here, we have 100% inbound TLS rate. So we are in good shape here. If, for example, we decided we were going to build our own server, our own mail server, we would now have to manage this part because Amazon would no longer be doing that. And so we'd have to get our certificates and do all the authentication stuff in the back end. So this is very IT specific, but is also specific to the vendor that you're using. If you see anything other than 100% on this screen, change vendors, because this is sort of like table minimum stuff. If your email service provider is not sending out encrypted email traffic, they're not a very good provider.
Is it?
Okay.
Are there just a few players out there? So like when I think of, people who offer this, obviously Amazon, or, do they have, this will come out a little jagged, but do they have the market share of the offering that kind of a service, or are there other players? Like, are you basically, can you only sign up for Amazon, or are there other players out there who do similar things?
Oh, there's dozens. So MailChimp,
Okay.
Constant Contact, HubSpot, Marketo, all the marketing technology companies that we all know all have back-end mail infrastructure of some kind. They all have, some of them do. For example, MailChimp's transactional email service, Mandrill, does go through Amazon on the back end, but for their marketing stuff, they have their own server farms for it. So there's dozens of email providers out there.
Gotcha. It's, as I'm sort of thinking of it through the lens of, let's say I were just me running just katierobert.com, and I wanted to set up, an email newsletter. Obviously, I know the basics of, like, I should probably get people to subscribe to it. I should probably find a place to run it, like a Substack or, whatever. But then from there, my understanding of how it all works is kind of limited. So I'm relying on these vendors to know all of these other things and make sure that my email is protected, provided I'm not doing anything stupid like sending out a bunch of spammy emails.
That's right. And it gets complicated when you try and start sending from your own domains. Like if you use Substack, like I use Substack for my daily pandemic newsletter, and it's lunchtimepandemic.substack.com. So it's a substack.com domain. So all of this is their problem, right?
Okay.
It's a substack.com email. They get to deal with it. The moment I upgrade and pay for that service, and now it's coming from pandemicnewsletter.christopherspenn.com. Now it's my problem to make sure that all this stuff is set up. So that line really depends on the provider. For most marketing automation packages like a HubSpot or whatever, when you do the setup and the onboarding, there is a section where they say, hey, we need you to get with the IT team and do DNS stuff and configure it to make it all send correctly. But it doesn't always happen. It doesn't always happen correctly. So one of the things this is one of the reasons why this tool is so important, because it gives you the ability to see from Google's perspective, hey, did we set our stuff up correctly or not?
So even if I set up my newsletter through Substack, and I'm not picking on them, it's just the one that comes top of mind, I can still use a tool like this to run diagnostics to see, okay, why isn't my email going through? And then bring that back to my provider and say, hey, this is what I saw. Can you help me understand this? Or can you fix it?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And they're like, for only $19.99.
But that's super helpful, because I know a lot of, newsletters that are just starting are small businesses and, solopreneurs. And it can be overwhelming, the amount of things that you feel like you need to understand in order to get your business off the ground. And so knowing that these other vendors are supposed to be taking care of it is helpful, but also knowing that you can do your own set of diagnostics to bring back to them is also super helpful.
Exactly. Now, the last piece in here is delivery errors. Delivery errors is really simple, really easy. It basically says, hey, these are emails that you're sending us that are bad. Like you sent us email, sent email to people who don't exist, or things like that. And again, what you want to see is here is errors, very, very, very low errors. Same rules apply as basically spam. Under 1%, you're in good condition. 1 to 5%, not so much. And above 5%, you're probably not going to get allowed to deliver to Gmail at all, because Google server is going to say, wow, you're sending us a lot of crap. You're probably just a spam bot.
So this is not the people who come back to you and say, hey, I've unsubscribed 5 times, remove me from your database. this is on you because you haven't cleaned up your list of people who've moved jobs and that email address doesn't exist anymore. So it really drives home the point of, you know, at least once a quarter, more frequently if possible, clean up your, email list to remove all of those emails that are just bouncing. Don't keep trying to send to them.
Exactly right. You look at in there and say, you have Katie Robert at gmail.com, but it's with 4 B's, and a silent Q somewhere. Like, okay, so that's going to bounce. Google's going to say you're sending to somebody who doesn't exist. And that's what's going to show up here. And yeah, bad emails are the bane of every marketer. They're the bane of every marketing technology platform, every marketing automation platform. And you've got to keep it clean. And there's a few different ways to do this, depending on your service provider. Some of them will process bounces automatically. They'll say, okay, anything that bounces, we're gonna take it out. There are cleaning services. We use one called Million Verifier, and you upload your whole list, and it does checks and says, okay, these addresses are showing a bounce already, so take them out of your database because you shouldn't send email to them. And then obviously, when you get messages in your inbox, like when we send out the Trust Insights newsletter, I get the replies to newsletter at trustinsights.ai. When you get that message that says Katie Robert no longer works at this company, the autoresponder, it's like, okay, manually take that out of the list.
So it sounds like there's, in terms of takeaways, there's a few things that you, as the person running the email, should be doing all the time. One is don't send spammy emails. Probably number one. Two is, make sure you're getting ahead of the bounced emails and keep your list clean. And the third one is basically if someone unsubscribes, then make sure you're removing them as well. And keep an eye on how many times you're being marked as spam. So obviously that doesn't cover all the things, but it sounds to me in terms of priority and the things that you have control over, those are some of the best practices that you want to make sure you're doing on a regular basis.
That's exactly right. Make sure your list is clean. Make sure everyone is on it, is that actually wants to be there. And then when you go through these different options, some of these things, spam rate is pretty much is somewhat under your control. Like, don't add people to the list that shouldn't be there. IP and domain IP reputation, that's an IT thing, so you're gonna need some help with that. Domain reputation, that's a company-wide thing. Make sure people aren't misbehaving. Feedback loop is an IT thing. Authentication is an IT and DNS thing. Encryption is probably a vendor thing, and delivery errors are your responsibility as a marketer. So yeah, there's different areas of responsibility, but in each of these things, there's something that you can do to improve your overall scores from Google's perspective.
I think too, don't be afraid to let people unsubscribe from your list. If they don't want to be there, then don't waste that mental real estate trying to get them to stay.
Yep, exactly. And give them other options. So, for example, there's the Analytics for Marketers Slack group. You go to trustinsights.ai/analytics for marketers. You can go and see some updates and things there. We post the company newsletter on our website. So if you don't want the email, as long as you can remember to show up on Wednesdays, we'll typically try and post the newsletter. If there's a text messaging list of some kind, you can notify people that way. So give people lots of different ways to get content based on the way that works best for them. Don't insist that it has to be through just through email. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter as long as they're reading your stuff.
That's true. And if they don't want to, you don't need them.
Exactly. And so that's Postmaster tools. Again, there's a lot of stuff this is where you're really talking about true marketing technology, where marketing and IT are joined at the hip, and what both parties do has an impact on the overall outcome. So you can't go it alone. You shouldn't go it alone. If you want to, make things as easy as possible, buy a 6-pack of beer, go down to IT on Friday afternoon and say, hey, I'm just checking on some things. You guys want to, walk me through what we have in place and stuff if you have an IT department. And if you don't, if you're a smaller business, work with your vendors, work with the companies that are providing these services, and do some of the checks, checking your own Postmaster tools. And if you see things that don't look right, like Katie was saying, don't be afraid to ask those vendors that you are paying money for to help you out.
That's it. Make sure that you can utilize that contact us and support, because that's what it's there for. And if they don't know there's a problem, they're not going to spend a lot of vendors don't proactively just go ahead and fix things unless you raise your hand and say, this is a problem. So be that annoying person. If you're paying for something, make sure you're getting what you're paying for.
And if they don't fix it, it's time to change vendors.
Mm-hmm. So, John, how long is your to-do list these days?
Yeah, well, the good news is I do have the Marketing Over Coffee list uses a different domain for email. So that's cool. I'll check the other domain and see how screwed up that one is. But as of right now, there's nothing new from today on the list.
That's
so
good.
we'll save that for next week.
So, in exciting news, a little bit of a preview, next week is our 1 year anniversary show. And so 1 year ago, next Thursday, we actually started doing this live stream. And so if you have questions that you want us to cover, just questions about doing a weekly live stream, if you want to find out whatever happened to that air conditioner that my husband threw out of the window during the first recording of the live stream, those are all questions that we are happy to answer. It has now become the joke of it's the 1 year anniversary of my husband, tossing appliances out the window when I'm trying to get work done.
I'm looking over at my own air conditioner thinking, oh, I better not touch that.
Just don't touch it while you're trying to
during
record
the show. Right.
a show. Yes. Toss it out the window after.
All right, folks. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week. Thanks for watching today. Be sure to subscribe to our show wherever you're watching it. For more resources and to learn more, check out the Trust Insights podcast at trustinsights.ai/TI podcast and a weekly email newsletter at trustinsights.ai/newsletter. Got questions about what you saw in today's episode? Join our free Analytics for Marketers Slack group at trustinsights.ai/analytics for marketers. See you next time.